thank you for coming. As we set up and start up, there is a, we'll move to the, my name's David Seeliger, the president of the Alberta Land-Based Development Partnership. So just a bit of housekeeping. If you're looking for information regarding the AGM, you'll see at the top of the agenda, there'll be an agenda in the top of the middle of the page. This event is being recorded and will be posted publicly. There'll be some networking from noon to 12:30. Now, when we come to voting, because we are voting on a few items here, like agenda and the like, so you'll put in the chat 1 for moving, 2 for seconder, and 3 for oppose. If there's no either of those, it will, silence means in favour. You can use the question and answers and react and change your view based on the functions of the in front of you here. So I call the meeting to order, and I confirm we have quorum, so we can proceed with the AGM. So here is the agenda today. Very similar to most agendas. We have, as you see in front of us, some reports, treasury report and business, and some other, and some voting for election of directors. So do we have someone move to adopt the agenda for today? Craig is moved by Craig, and Bert, okay, and someone a seconder? Just need a seconder. Second by Bert. Anyone opposed? Not carried. Just looking at reviewing and adopting the meeting notes for the, that should be 2023 AGM. Sorry, that was my mistake. I changed it. Here are the attendees from the last AGM. Yes, notes. Here's some of the notes we have in front of us. President's report, executives, working group reports, treasurer's report, and then adjournment. Do we have anyone to, are the meeting notes correct? Do we have someone move to adopt the meeting notes from 2023? Anton, seconder? Just need a seconder. Bert, anyone opposed? Carried. Okay, moving on to the President's report, which is my report. Firstly, I would thank all the partners for 2024. I have a few new ones as well, moving forward: Ecologic Horticulture and Guerrilla Gardener. So thank you all for your support over the year, and look forward to continuing your support into the future, into 2025. So the 2024 was quite a successful year. We did quite a few webinars, site tours. We did site tours and specialist projects as well, and we were preparing for the conference itself. So it's been a fair bit of effort doing that. So moving into 2025, the conference in Edmonton, which was the first one since 2012, was a great success. And I'd just like to thank all the volunteers and participants and sponsors who attended that conference. Looking into the future, we're here our mandate is to serve the members, which is industry and community at large, to promote the use of green infrastructure, across the province. So apart from education and training, we also do a lot of work that's project work that is funded through various organizations and grants. And it's been a major part of the organization's activities. And some of it also has involved flow through work from other consultants and support and construction contractors. This has created quite a large body of knowledge and expertise and experience, which has been really invaluable to the organization and has, made us sort of well known in Alberta and beyond. However, it has not really helped with our operational capacity. To sustain an organization in the future, we need to understand the partners. What are your gaps and needs? How can the partnership help you? Ideally, in collaborating together to get economies of benefit and scale. We have an opportunity over the next few years to really start focusing on this collaborative type partnerships. We do various projects, but we're looking at trying to expand that. And currently the city of Calgary is asking us, have a whole wish list of things they want to do and how the ALIDP can be involved. And hopefully some of these things will allow other municipalities to sort of piggyback onto some of this work. So we're really looking forward to 2025 and moving on into the future. The other thing that we are doing, I just want to step back a bit, as part of our future focus is the board is looking to a series of facilitated sessions and workshops where we are going to do a deep dive into how we operate, identifying our gaps in decision making and policies, so we can sort of really, set ourselves up to prioritize this type of work. So moving on to the many thanks that I have here. So we've had a number of working groups which have been quite successful this year, including the RAM, managed by Anton, Stormer by Norm Newman, and then the EWAG, which is the Events and Activities Working Group by Bert. I'll let you know today that Bert is intending to step down from this role, and so we thank Bert in particular for all the efforts he's put in over the years in chairing this working group. The board's going to look at that to decide, what's the best form. Is it better to actually have focus groups for organizing specific events rather than it being an overall sort of working group in its own right? So we'll let the membership know once we've decided which way we intend to move forward with on that. But I'd like to thank all the working group chairs again. And also I'd like to thank the director, all the directors, fellow directors on the board for your tireless work over the last year. And a special thanks to Mary Quinlan, who is stepping down this year. So thank you for all your efforts, Mary. And lastly, I'd like to thank Lita for her tireless effort in running and operating the ALIDP and all the work and expertise she delivers to many partners, particularly things that we don't even realize she is doing. So thank you, Lita.
Thank you, David. And similarly, back to you. Much gratitude for your many years of service in role of president, which is sometimes also a lot of behind the scenes effort that nobody realizes what's going on. So really appreciate you as well. So I guess I'll return for the executive director's report. And David's driving here, so I just remind you, if you've been with us before, and if you're new, we have 4 strategic pillars, which are kind of more like a sandwich. We have the top-down piece of bread that's the policy work, making an enabling regulatory environment. We have the grassroots social support, the other piece of bread that's sort of the getting buy-in and understanding from citizens and politicians and more knowledge. And then in the middle, we have more the feasibility and the knowledge and tools, more applying to industry, but also training the trainer, equipping municipalities to deliver their own programs to grassroots groups, and to go take the full sandwich. So lots of different things that go on. So in the grassroots category last year, we had a number of speaking, writing engagements. So North Lenora rain gardens, you would have seen them on the Edmonton site tour last year. Comparative, one has permavoid storage chamber under it, another identically sized and loaded rain garden without. So there's a research component, but the community, this is a community hub project, demonstration of the rain gardens. So Eco Fair last year, we had all afternoon tours on the half hour, and we were I didn't get to sit down. I finally called timeout for a glass of hot water after 3 hours. And what's interesting, after talking to different people, there was a different tone where people had heard of rain gardens. Some people said, "Oh, I heard you speak at something," or "I saw your publication." And so just a different feel of reach into community, into Edmonton, and part of that through the Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues. They have been good supporters, and we had the opportunity to work with the community to identify. They thought they maybe had an opportunity for a rain garden, but they didn't know. And we were kind of able to do some preliminary work and then kick them over to EPCOR and hook them up. And EPCOR's taken the ball. And as far as I know, something's happening with that community out of that. Mount Royal University approached me for an interview. They did a article on another one of the community hubs in Crossroads in Calgary, where they were aware of that garden, and so they wrote an article. Quite often, the articles that get written for newspaper things, you never. I always ask them if I can see it when it's finished, and it almost never happens, but I know it's out there in the world somewhere. Was interviewed by the Horticultural Society for an hour by Cass Smythe with one of their monthly members only things. And so we talked about one of the things that was kind of a new idea for them was that for resiliency, maybe non-native shrubs are not very climate resilient, and it seemed to be something climate resilient, and it seemed to be something they hadn't really heard before. But yeah, it's always interesting to talk to the horticultural societies because they know so much about gardening, but when you give them that water lens and filter, they see things in a different way. And it's very gratifying to be in conversation with those groups. The Bow River Basin Council is the local watershed protection and advisory council around Calgary in the South Saskatchewan Basin. Last December they had a stewardship forum, and I went and presented on some of these rain garden efforts. Next slide. And so the current phase we're on with these rain garden demonstration and research sites is this infill, and I've added small sites to that, what it is, and you'll see in a second why. We're looking really at how far we can push the implementation on small sites of the rain gardens. In new communities, we're really looking at deeper topsoil, but it is also if we can get rain gardens in there as well, that has lots of benefits. So we are sneak peek. This happened in 2025, but we've incorporated the greenfield into it as well. Next slide. And so overall, we're not going to get into this slide deeply, but we've had since 2017, we first said we've got to have examples of rain gardens in Alberta. Previously, our examples are being taken from Minnesota. we had to sort of show, proof of concept, and the move. Then we did community centers, realized the actual halls have, a fair amount of unclaimed landscape associated with them, and have done, I think, 8 of those projects in Calgary and Edmonton. And then we're now on this phase of saying, well, how, more to optimization and looking at the barriers, and then it's moving to citizens actually installing and scaling. And we know that Edmonton has started a small funding or rebate. They'll give you $11 per square meter of contributing area to rain garden. They're using our resources to share with citizens the Clean Runoff Action Guide, and it's not just rain gardens that they're funding, but quite a few different things. And we're expecting to work with City of Calgary coming up. So this is ticking along. It's definitely a long burn, and it's really come to light things like the material supply, and all these other sort of tools that kind of go with it. So we've got an eye on quite a few different pieces that are necessary to make this work. Next slide. And one of those things is this public-facing resilientlandscaping.ca website, where we want to put those good news stories, and then have this lot level calculator that's really both an educational tool and an actual calculator to determine, and sort of like, well, I've got an opportunity for a rain barrel, not a rain garden. How much rain barrel implementation do I need? Or maybe, I've got a legacy house and I want a 50-year roof. I might consider doing a green roof. I'm looking over that from my master bedroom, and I'd really rather look at something green rather than, different motivations for different things. And it lets you play around with these. And we had started on that. We're hoping to come back to it. This is one of the kinds of projects where we'd like to see a number of municipalities, and maybe also people from industry, step up to support, a shared effort to bring this together. Next slide. And so moving on with other knowledge and tools, our webinars, which have been quite successful. We did a spring series that was looking at design, construction, and what comes next, comparing stories from Edmonton and Calgary and different approaches and experiences. And then in the fall, a series on urban wetlands, where we're really going, extending the we're not just talking about current practice, we're talking about what should happen in the future, and some nifty things that have come out of that, sort of a live moving of the thought as we move through the series, to an interesting conclusion that I think Anton will probably hint at, because it didn't come until 2025, but don't want to steal the thunder from next year. And then we were able to host for City of Calgary some of the great work that they've been doing on soil bioengineering, riparian area bioengineering. And if other, municipalities or any of our members have some initiative that they would like to highlight, we can certainly do that through a webinar. So that's something to keep in mind. Site tours, the competitive among you can count the kilometers that we traveled in Calgary versus Edmonton. We did have to stick an AGM in the middle of the Calgary tour, but we had 2 bus loads in Edmonton, and I think, it's always good to get out and see the projects. And so we haven't done that this year, but probably again next year we'll do something. Next slide. And as you've heard, Bert has stepped down as being chair, and that's partly as, we're looking for the next generation of folks to come up and maybe find some different modes and ways to facilitate figuring out what we're going to do with webinars and so on. So, we'll wait for the next incarnation. Next slide. and quite a big effort on the on 2 documents. We've been working for a few years with the International Institute for Sustainable Development out of Winnipeg on a rather large report on benefits and performance of natural infrastructure and highlighting those what we're calling constructed practices and indicative performance. And Anton was heavily involved in that as well. And then the design of bioretention systems CSA standard was due for an update. And so I had the privilege to be involved in developing quite a bit of the documentation for this seed document, especially related to the good news now. It's going to have rain gardens identified as a separate practice and really sets the path forward. And David Seeliger also deeply involved with that, and really gave us the opportunity for Alberta to have a strong voice in the direction of that national standard. Next slide. On the policy planning regulation side, the water availability engagement through Alberta Environment and Protected Areas came late in the year, but did certainly have some effort in December. And as mentioned in the about the webinar series, really looking at how we connect source control practices like rain gardens how can we integrate them into other things where there are requirements, biodiversity requirements, the ability to connect habitat, not just a pond over in the corner, but a pond connected to those upland sort of other more distributed controls in the upland, and then what credits and offsets could be achieved. So we'll be circling back to that topic on a regular basis, I'm sure. And the other thing, really looking more at the municipal level, how to interface with lot grading approvals, what setbacks we need for some of these residential scale practices, and that's going to be an ongoing thing. Next. And another working group, stormwater reuse working group with Dr. Norm Newman. Next slide. They have Norm is really leading this, delving into mapping out the process for the water safety plan aspect under the health guidelines that we have, and Alberta Health has been involved in the working group as well. So there's sort of that sort of block, and then I've really been carrying the banner on the Water Act related topics. And eventually, as we are coming more to One Water, we think that we have could have the role of broadening to this overall water reuse community practice. Next slide. And so we've got all this information now that we need to get out, but we don't necessarily have capacity to do that. We have to sort of figure out how we can, because we must get it out there. We have the need for decision support tools like the water balance calculator. We're going to be supporting City of Calgary and some enhancements and review of the triple bottom line calculator that they're working on, which is an internal tool for the city, as far as we understand it so far. Then the idea of certification for designers and contractors, if you're going to be putting out rebate programs and you don't actually have a landscape design and construction community that knows what it is you're looking for, there's a QA/QC kind of challenge there that we want to be able to address. And so as fast as I can get to it, we're hoping that that's one of the priority products that we can get into the marketplace. And then increasing our sphere of influence is kind of happening naturally through some of these broader activities and documents that are going to get out into the world. And so thank you. We have an awesome board of directors and are deep in governance, soul searching, and what the future is going to be as we look at, again, some of the younger generation coming in. And I have to say that Fraser Hayes has gone another way. He has a music career that he's had, not that he's a musician, but hosting folk festivals, and he got an offer he couldn't refuse. So we didn't have long enough with him to really convince him that stormwater was much more interesting than running folk festivals. So he has gone, and we'll be looking at how we can move forward with take another tact with how to help build capacity. So thanks to everyone, the membership. I'm hoping to talk to more of you this year. And yeah, so many things. Definitely more requests for assistance than we have capacity for, I think, is what the obvious message is, which is a good sign. It's a good sign. So back to you, David. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lita. Now we're up to part of the agenda where we're electing directors. So currently, I think, is it 5 directors are sort of end of their term or have stepped down or at the end of their term. Today we do have 5 nominations with 4. I'll go through them exactly. But before we do that, there's a protocol of actually asking for any nominations from the floor. So I'll ask that 3 times. So I call for nominations to the floor. So I guess if you were to nominate, you would have to put something in the chat. And for the second time, I call for any nominations from the floor. And the third and final time, I call for any nominations from the floor. Having seen no nominations, I will go through and I guess maybe I did this backwards, but anyway. But here are the candidates that have nominated, and Amy Ling, Jill Prosser, Anton, and Jeff are all renominating from the board who have been on the board. And we have also Sophie Warren, who is has, I guess, also been nominated to participate in the board. So, Lita, we don't need to do anything else because it will be by proclamation, so we don't need to go through any sort of little talks.
Yeah, so I guess maybe we'll just put Sophie on the spot to introduce herself because she's new and incoming. And yeah, how does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
So the board is the directors are acclaimed.
Do you want me to stop sharing or just do it on the little window on the side?
Sorry?
Yeah, so is Sophie there?
Oh, I need to promote her from the floor. That's what needs to happen.
Yeah, okay.
There she is.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Oh.
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, great. I was really hoping I'd have a bit of some guidance from our other existing directors so I know what to say about myself, but I can give just a bit of an introduction. Yeah, so I'm Sophie Warren. I'm a stormwater management engineer with a background primarily in green infrastructure and LID. I've been with the City of Calgary for just over a year now, and prior to this, I was with the City of Vancouver's green infrastructure implementation team. So I sit in a bit of a unique role that I love very much with stormwater operations, which is very fun because, you know, I don't just design and put these things into the world and then step away from them and never see them ever again and wonder how they're doing. I get to follow them through their life cycle. I get to see, the constructability challenges, the issues that happen over time, how they change, how we can adaptively manage them. I also get to work with a lot of really great people and different departments in the city who kind of all have vested interests in these assets, not necessarily from a water management perspective, but, resilient landscaping, biodiversity. So I'm very excited to continue the work in connecting all of those people towards making sure we continue to implement LIDs and green infrastructure in the city of Calgary. One of my roles also is just managing the maintenance of our LID assets. And one of the things that I'd like to move towards, and especially through work with the LID, is understanding how we can better support our community partners and our more privately owned assets. So yeah, that's a bit about me. I don't know if there's anything else that I need to say, but if anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much, Sophie. So I can declare the board candidates to be elected by a proclamation. So thank you, board members, including Sophie. Give them a clap. Okay. Thank you. Then moving on, we'll have to call Craig in for the Treasurer's report.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I'm Craig Kipke, Treasurer of the ALIDP, and I'll just go through the financial statements and then we'll make a motion to adopt the 2024 financial statements. So some of the highlights, again, this Calfans is our independent auditor, and at the beginning of our financial statements, they've given a clean opinion. That's the key part of this message in the text right here, is they've given a clean opinion on our financial statements, and they're happy with them. So that's an important part of the process here. Next slide. So just I'm going to touch on a few highlights, I guess, from comparison of 2024 financials to 2023. We've seen overall a drop in assets. A lot of that has to do with the use of restricted cash, which is a lot to do with our grants and the grant money that we've got. And then as we go through a year, we use that grant money up. And so that is why we see a drop in assets. And same thing on our liabilities, we've seen a drop in our liabilities, again, to be expected with the year. We've seen an overall drop in our unrestricted net assets from about 150,000 in 2023 to 101,000, and I'll explain that a little bit further, but that was what we budgeted for and what we expected. And then we have our internal restricted net assets, so sort of our rainy day fund, which has remained unchanged at 75,000. So overall, our net assets have dropped from about 225,000 to 176,000 between the 2 years. And again, that was what we sort of predicted and budgeted for the 2024 year. Go to the next slide, please, David. So just a little bit of the reasons why. In general, big comparison between 2023 and 2024, our revenues was down probably about $85,000, and a lot has to do with one of our bigger revenue sources in 2023 was our event, and in 2024 we did not host an event, and obviously we've had our 2025 event. Because we're on an 18-month rotation roughly on our events, we're going to see years where we don't have events, and then we'll have a couple of years in a row, like we'll have an event. We had an event this 2025, and then we'll have one in 2026. But again, those are all things that we're monitoring and we're budgeting. So most of our revenues this year were from grants and projects, and our membership fees were pretty much flat between 2023 and 2024. You go to our operating expenses, roughly about what they were similar, only about a $10,000 increase. But again, a little bit more on our salaries and wages and consulting fees. And that goes to, we had Fraser working for us. We did some more work with consultants. And so again, that's where we see some increases. And in terms of administrative expenses, again, it's a little bit more with salaries and insurance is always going up. So again, some areas that we're seeing a little bit of increases, but again, those were all sort of understood and budgeted for. So we saw a $10,000 increase on our administrative expenses. Overall, we had a $47,000 loss, and that was what we had budgeted for this year. Again, we in comparison to the $60,000 profit. in 2023. And again, a lot has to do with when we have events. We are, we're counting on these events to make the revenue for us, and that will hopefully, have us for the years where we don't have events too. So again, that's that. And I think I've touched on this. Our net assets are down because we had a loss of about 47,000. Our net assets are down that amount. And so again, was what we had budgeted for, what we were aiming for. And so again, there's no no concern with regards to that drop in overall net assets. Before I ask for a motion, I'll ask if there's any questions from anyone. Feel free to throw it in the chat about the financials. Not seeing anyone, I'll still wait. But again, if I could get a motion to adopt the 2024 financials as presented. I need a first and a seconder, please. Thank you, Anton. Seconder, please. I've got Vanessa first. Thank you, Vanessa. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion adopted. Thank you. And thank you, David.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you very much. Now I'll just call for any new business. Okay, while I'm doing that, I think there is a webinar, a tentative webinar, just an upcoming. On November 27th from 9 to noon. It's related to the City of Calgary have been doing some LID interviews with various organizations internally and externally. And so they're looking at presenting those results and looking at some narratives around that, some myths and some wins and things. And then also, I guess we've mentioned it before, but and Craig mentioned it too, our next conference will be in November 2026. And so there will be, planning of that will start imminently, but it does take quite a lot of effort. So anyone who wants to help participate in the planning of the conference and trade show, which will be in Calgary next year, I'm sure there'll be a call that goes out. Next, there is the research and the RAM, or Research and Monitoring Working Group. Anton will give a presentation on for his report.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I'm good. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for making the time to attend this today. I'm Anton, and I chair the Research and Monitoring Working Group, and I'm also on the board of the ALIDP and the vice president of the ALIDP as well. I guess a couple of things that I'd like to remind everyone of is the mandate of the working group is to foster collaboration data sharing among academia, industry, and municipalities across the province. And when it comes to the terms of reference, next slide, please. Perfect. When it comes to the purpose, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but this was established in 2020. So we are now a 5-year-old working group. We wanted to identify industry relevant research needs, coordinate data sharing and analysis, foster collaboration to leverage expertise, reduce duplication of effort, and ensure resources, as well as review and contextualize findings and data according to implications for design and analysis and allied objectives, which there can be a few, as well as disseminate findings. And I guess last but not least is to provide oversight and peer review on ALIDP and RAM projects, as well as projects that might come from the membership as well. If you're looking for a sounding board, our group is a good place for that. When it comes to goals and direction for 2024 and 2025, and these were shared at the last AGM. So one of them was to continue ongoing design specification work and refine performance objectives. and associated validation support updates to CSA bioretention design standard. You heard Lita talking about the involvement of the ALIDP in that, as well as conduct sessions to link industry modeling tools and practices with lessons learned from academic data. Strengthen the connection between Calgary and Edmonton, and that relates to the municipalities and kind of strategy planning, as well as the academic institutions, and ideally identify some of the collective needs when it comes to the connection between research, practice, and implementation. And the other one, which again we've touched on briefly, is this improved understanding of parallels between LID and some of the other practices, so wetlands, natural infrastructure, as there's quite a bit of work emerging in those areas, and we'd like to make sure that we're aligning with that work when it comes to research and monitoring. And lastly, it is to broaden the research expertise, which does relate to the previous point as well, but then looking at what are some of the academic research kind of happening that we can leverage in improving our understanding and ultimately equipping Albertans with better knowledge and tools. So I'll just quickly go through each one of the goals and some of the activities associated with that have happened. Lita already mentioned that there's been input to the CSA standard, the bioretention standard. So as a group, we did provide some feedback to the bioretention design updates based on some of the local experience and design practice. We spent some time discussing infiltration assumptions, and particularly the fate of water as it travels through infiltration practices, and some of the limitations that we're seeing with clay soils, and some of the expectations sort of pre-development, post-development, as well as infiltration rate values, water balance outcomes, and their implications for downstream infrastructure sizing. And last but not least, certainly an ongoing discussion around media recommendations. So there was a letter drafted kind of summarizing some of the local work and emerging directions when it comes to bioretention and soil cell media specifications, and it certainly remains to be a work in progress. When it comes to industry modeling tools and academic data and their integration, so we've started some discussions on incorporating the LID performance data, particularly from the local research and monitoring, and then understanding how do they fit into relevant modeling platforms that are relevant to the industry, and particularly some of the issues with which parameters and at what scale does it make sense. The other aspect of this was looking at monitoring data gaps. So we've identified some challenges in working with existing, again, local data sets. We have highly variable data because of the differences in design and some of the potentially designs being older than what we now know would be the guidance moving forward. And there is sort of this ongoing need for consistent water quantity and quality data sets, and then understanding the outcomes of such data sets and how they would be used. And certainly facilitated some knowledge exchange was the monthly meetings and the dialogue between the practitioners and researchers, and comparing modeling practices in Calgary and Edmonton, and hearing highlighting areas of alignment and divergence. And one of the examples is a simple one is a single event versus continuous modeling, as well as many others. Next slide, please. And when it comes to connection between Calgary and Edmonton, it's pretty important to ensure that what we're doing is coordinated across the province. I'm highlighting Calgary and Edmonton, but certainly would like to make sure that everything that we do is relevant to all municipalities in Alberta. And then one of the things that were done is just sharing cross-jurisdictional comparisons, updates with respect to research and monitoring projects, rain garden monitoring, flood testing work, decision-making tool, triple bottom line analysis is an example, some of the strategies in the different municipalities and where research and monitoring fits within some of the decision-making, which I think is the most important aspect of it. And discussed common priorities, and integration was the overall municipal planning and strategy, as I mentioned. And then certainly there's a lot of opportunities. RAM is the working group where we focus specifically on research and monitoring, but there's certainly a lot more activities happening as part of the ALIDP partnerships, so conferences, webinars, and even at RAM meetings, sometimes we have presentations by invited speakers or participants of the working group. And that really gives a great opportunity for us to understand the research, the drivers, the needs, and where we're going to be moving forward. One of the goals and the themes was to understand LID as part of this grander umbrella of nature-based solutions. And we did look at some of the thematic linkages and similarities in hydrologic function, habitat value, performance metrics between ephemeral wetlands and LID systems, and ultimately how that potentially links to wetland compensation policies and discussions, as Lita mentioned. And really, when it comes to knowledge transfer too, we were able to at least initiate discussion on wetland research findings, and then how can these inform LID design and monitoring approaches and vice versa, particularly when we're talking about wetlands in urban settings. And with that, there's opportunities for integration too, because we can, instead of looking at wetlands and LID as sort of separate practices and separate bodies of knowledge, ideally, we want to be working towards coordinated research and potentially implementation to position wetlands, low impact development practices, and natural infrastructure as complementary components of an interconnected network. Next slide, please. One of the important aspects of the working group is certainly to try to broaden our perspectives and expertise. So we're exploring some of the academic collaborations, potential alignment with academic leaders to integrate their research into LID practice. We were able to attract or invite participants with technical expertise. Sophie Warren's actually one of them that adds other layers, in particular in this case, for example, operation and maintenance. It's a pretty important one when we try to make some of the research and monitoring findings and discussions be practical and relevant. And I guess one of the things I will mention is certainly there's collaboration pathways as we're continually looking for opportunities, webinars, conferences, joint research initiatives, and resource sharing as well, because academia can bring resources in the form of students, but there's certainly a need to make sure that the research is relevant because everybody benefits, and then ultimately that it aligns with some of the strategic planning of the municipal governments and potentially provincial governments as well. When it comes to next steps, these are still the evolving priorities, but I wanted to share some of the directions that we're heading in. So one of them is to translate academic and LIDP generated data into design and performance recommendations. We have been collecting quite a bit of data and we need a better understanding of what we can glean from it and what kind of data potentially we need moving forward. The other one is to expand knowledge exchange and translation across the province. So definitely this is an opportunity to call out to the membership. If you see there being opportunities to kind of initiate that knowledge sharing, please come forward and reach out. And then the other aspect is to identify opportunities to standardize monitoring approaches and data sets, because we do want to be monitoring systems that are designed for monitoring if and when possible, and then really understanding what kind of data do we need to inform some future decisions. And last but not least is engaging leading academic groups, because one of the key objectives is research. And there's a lot of good research being done, not just in Alberta, but also potentially even nationwide, and making sure that we're aligning with that research and are positioned to benefit from some of the findings. And this is pretty much it for me. What I would like to close with is if you have any ideas, if you would like to contribute to the research and monitoring working group, please reach out. Let's start a conversation. My email is right there. And just as a reminder, so we do meet every third Friday of each month, and typically it's between 10 and 12 p.m. So thank you so much, and I'll pass it on to David.
Thank you very much, Anton, for your report. Now we are coming to the close of our AGM, and so I would like a motion to adjourn the 2025 AGM, adjourned by Bert. So thank you very much, everyone. So right off, Lita, we're going straight into your presentation.
Yes, no breaks for us. We're just going to roll here.
So that's good. You got a little bit extra spare time, I think.
I so appreciate it. There's so much to talk about, but yeah, just absorbing the work by Anton as a volunteer leader of that group. We're so fortunate to have his passion and expertise carrying that. We're hoping to kind of corral some of the assembled knowledge to get some of that information out to you on the status of some of that research. It's sort of been an incubating time, and we'll see where that goes. So presentation today: too much and not enough. It's kind of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Next slide. So as many of you will know, APA called for input in a phase 1 look at this water availability topic in early January 2025. And so we said, well, it's not enough to answer the questions. We've been hammering on things for 15 years now, and the message hasn't really got through. So we said, let's write a background document. And so this was an attempt that ended up to be kind of a manifesto. This publicly available. It's sort of like thoughts and musings and background. And so a lot of the information from today is in there in some form or another. And one of the things that's in there towards the end, when we're extolling the virtues of low impact development practices, is a table that kind of tries to lay out where these different practices are used, at what sort of density of development, and then the water storage type, like how is water related to what's the mechanism for these different practices, characteristics of that. And then the land use context is this, primarily a thing for retrofit or new development or redevelopment, because sometimes you get pushback on the idea of, I can't fit a rain garden in. It's sort of like, well, really, deeper topsoil and new development, if it were actually done, could be quite beneficial. But even though we are seeing some movement on deeper topsoil bylaws in the bigger jurisdictions, we still see that you only need 100 millimeters of topsoil under turf, and it's just such a lost opportunity for increasing absorptive capacity just by having more topsoil depth and resilience and health of what grows on top of it. Next slide. And we're going to just dig into this a tiny bit. So looking at these runoff storage mechanisms of the different practices, really 4 ways that stormwater can affect storage of water, and that's the void space. So in aged soil, we see there's macro pores from earthworms and the death of roots, these sort of openings that are in the soil, macro micro pores that provide that capacity for water to be stored in times of plenty. And it's also void space in any kind of substrate, but that's more is more. If you have more void space, you have more capacity. Then we have practices with temporary surface ponding or a chamber that's associated with it, usually underneath. Practices with a permanent wet pool, and then this idea of the subsurface storage layer, which I pulled out separately from the idea of a chamber, because it's usually associated with an under drain and can be sort of oversized a bit, but really just indicating which practices are likely to have that under drain condition. Next slide. And so Just looking at what has void space in the yellow, like really everything that isn't a cistern kind of thing. And just to be out there, I guess I chose an example here where the substrate is actually the gap graded base material for permeable pavement, because there's a void space associated with that. Next slide. Temporary surface ponding, anything that has some kind of a basin or underground storage. And I'm sort of in yellow, the things that are most likely to be this, and then in the muddy yellow with the asterisk, things that maybe could have it, but are maybe not, or less likely, like an ephemeral wetland is only going to be temporary surface ponding. And it's not meant to like precisely put it does definitely or doesn't definitely have this feature, but just to give an indication of what's typical. So here, this absorbent landscaping, I'm trying to promote the definition of that as being just a micro depression, maybe 3 to 5 centimeters in a landscape, no hard surface being directed into it, roofs or roads or anything like that, just literally a divot on the landscape. So especially for large events, it's just that little bit extra capacity when the soils might be saturated. Next slide. The permanent pool we understand commonly to be the wet pond or wetlands. Next slide. And the subsurface storage layers most likely associated with bioretention because of our tight clay subsoils, but also sometimes associated with soil cells or tree trenches. Permeable pavement can have an enhanced layer like that as well. And rain gardens, you see very rarely, but I suppose it could happen. And this example was actually an infiltration trench. Is the only one I could find a good example of, like, they had this substantial sort of subsurface storage layer, but we don't very often see this practice. But in this case, it was the alternative to a pipe. Next slide. So if we think of how to categorize what we're getting from these different practices, we have these different ecosystem goods and services that at the bottom, all the very basic processes in the supporting goods and services, and regulating services, which is really mostly one of the main places where low impact development benefits. And provisioning, I've got the water for beneficial use. That's really like what sort of products can come from the ecosystem. And cultural is really something too where LID shines. The provision of shade, comfort being insulation, maybe additional insulation from a green roof, temperature regulation, cooling, the wellness that we, having gone through COVID and the more research emerging, the directly linking wellness to greening. We have all these things in play. And so what we know from experience of looking at things in silos is that usually leads to something else being compromised that you also really need. And so approaching things holistically is absolutely essential. We can't just optimize for water availability. We have to look at everything more holistically. And so the LID pitch and belief, and I think what we kind of agree on now is that a distributed approach is likely to tick more boxes and provide more benefits. And really that boils down to we can't just look at the receiving water body with apportionment and what goes to Saskatchewan, or what the in-stream flow needs are, but we have to look at the needs of the landscape itself and how it integrates with the experience of the people on it. And just mentioning that the ecosystem goods and services, really that's through the lens of the human use. The ecosystem as functions separate from the goods and services that it provides, but we have gone down the path of looking at goods and services to understand what these benefits that are usually externalized actually mean. And as we try and get more and more out of the landscape, it becomes more and more important to get this right. Next slide. And one of the areas where this is really critical, and ChatGPT, take it for what it's worth, this is its interpretation, soil cells and drought mitigation, this way of having trees in the landscape as it relates to drought. We get all these benefits from trees, but to sustain them in drought, it is likely that for longer term drought, that we absolutely must have a soil cell or some kind of way of getting that additional passive irrigation, certainly for droughts that are up to, we've seen sort of 3 years here in Calgary. They're actually cutting the 70-year-old cottonwood across the street from us down this morning that didn't make it through the 3rd year of the drought. So this little enhancement from stormwater we've seen already, certainly with elm trees, without soil cells, just in the droughts that we've had. Certainly the survivability is much higher with the soil cells. So we can, this idea of working across the landscape, we can't just put all the trees in the corner in one place. We need them, throughout our communities. And it's sort of indicative of what's really true for the practices in general. Next slide. And so just putting a little bit finer point on what ecosystem services related to water might be, the different uses that we've examined. And you can see some of the risk analysis in the manifesto, and the benefits that we can derive from that. I'm not going to go into it for time reasons today, but yeah, I think we can move on from that. So some nice examples: City of Airdrie, which is a community just to the north of Calgary near the airport, undergoing rapid urbanization. They discharge into a small receiving stream, and so they have requirements to limit the volume of discharge from development. And the way that that's being achieved is by irrigation out of the stormwater ponds. And so where we're kind of at with what we've really, how we're really tackling this problem of too much water when we have a small receiving stream is to irrigate the landscape, collect all the water, put it in a pipe, get it to the pond, and then try and put that water back onto the landscape. So that's kind of our practices now. But of course, this is luxuriant irrigation. The landscape should not require this irrigation to survive. We're really trying to get rid of excess water. And I'll hammer that point a bit more later. And this year, they also were taking the water from hydrant flushing to then irrigate trees and flower baskets. So there we see drinking water that would have come from a withdrawal, not going back through a wastewater plant, but actually going to the landscape and possibly ending up as stormwater. So we're starting to see these crossovers between lines of treatment that were historically, quite separate. Next slide. And ChatGPT told me about these projects in Alberta where agriculture was doing rainwater harvesting from greenhouse roofs, and then being used for irrigation and fertigation, which is fertilizer plus irrigation in the same liquid, and then livestock watering, where roof runoff would be directed into dugouts or cisterns. And of course, roof runoff going into dugouts isn't something that the province has really examined. Next slide. So some of the good news stories from agriculture with these larger systems and how they were able to reduce the use of well water and municipal water, and that payback was working for them, and they were able to maintain yields. And Vanessa Higgins in Strathcona County also shared with me they had done a survey on rainwater harvesting, and maybe Vanessa, you could plop in the chat there some of the good statistics that we're seeing there. And also heard from EPCOR in Edmonton with this incentive program that they have seen a fair amount. Most of the interest is around rainwater harvesting, of course, getting a rebate on a rain barrel. And so that's still sort of traditionally how we think about things. But of course, that doesn't do much for stormwater management, because the water conservation objective means keep the rain in the rain barrel and only use it in the drought. Whereas for stormwater management, we really need the capacity of that rain barrel available and empty in the spring when it's wet, so that it will fill up and empty, fill up and empty. So that's one of the reasons why we like rain gardens more, because you don't have to sort of actively manage those things. Not time to go into details on that more so, but one of the things we certainly look at when we think about things for stormwater management purposes. Next slide. And this business of dugouts for livestock watering, but coming from rainwater. This is what highlights one of the things with EPA, where they're giving exemptions to stormwater ponds and dugouts the same, based on them being a basin. But what's important is this idea of like, well, where did that water come from? If it's a diversion of surface water, the idea of an exemption for this domestic use or the agricultural use up to this 6,250 cubic meters might make sense. But if it's drainage management, and whether that's in a dugout or a pond, the vessel isn't what really matters. It's where did that water come from and what is the purpose? And we've communicated that an absolute exemption for stormwater is inappropriate for a number of reasons. Two reasons. One, that that stormwater pond is not a body of water, it is a drainage management facility. And two, that an absolute exemption doesn't look at what the contributing area is and whether that's an appropriate amount or not, and it ends up being not very useful. Next slide. So data center cooling. This is not something that was on our radar really when we did our risk analysis with the Stormer groups a few years ago, 2022, but I think it was because we saw it as a separate sort of animal, not really relating to stormwater, sort of like the size of the ponds and stuff, not really relating to the needs of the data center cooling. But ChatGPT found that in South Carolina, and there's ChatGPT's typo for you, stormwater pond, a stormwater pond used for cooling water. The more common method, tertiary treated municipal wastewater as cooling makeup water, that is more common. And this nifty example from Toronto, where they were already looking at, the city was already looking at a new potable water intake that would be further out into the lake so that it wouldn't have as much sediment in it to be removed. They coupled that with a district cooling facility, so it isn't just being used for data centers, but it's being used, more groups are using it, but they aren't actually using the water directly and having it evapotranspire, but they're using it like a heat pump. They're just taking using it for the cooling of the temperature differential, and the water is being sent back into the lake. So it's just the thermal impact that's coming, which is another thing to have to grapple with, but nevertheless, it does get away from the idea of using water. Next slide. But the bad news about South Carolina is, yes, they started out using the stormwater for cooling, but exceeded its capacity, I think, fairly quickly. They made an application to use groundwater, which was approved, but there was citizen outcry and it was subsequently denied. They had to look for an alternative source. Next slide. And so demonstrating why we didn't really look at the data center cooling. Certainly other smaller uses for cooling are fair game, but the data center needs in particular, they need vast quantities of steady water, and of course rain and stormwater is not like that. And it is also the reason why we're not high on it being used for firefighting, incidentally, that, probably at the time when it's dry and you have more fire risk, you're going to go for that source, and it may not be there. Also, the decentralization really stormwater ponds are still relatively small basins compared to the needs of the data centers. And it probably also needs additional treatment. So effluent, tertiary treated effluent is a better candidate. And new technologies are on the horizon, and perhaps in our climate, the heat pump thing seems like it should be something you should be able to figure out. I am not an expert in this, but anyhow, next slide. Delta water, don't bother looking at that stuff on the right. That's just for background for people who are being introduced to the idea of how Delta water might be used in a master drainage plan, which we think is the appropriate place to implement Delta water. So this is the calculation between pre and post development, which says, in theory, what water is really available and needed to be managed for drainage, how we discriminate between what is a withdrawal and what is a drainage management practice, and just a little bit of the difference in the water balance between pre and post, or natural and urban. And the lower left are so evapotranspiration, how much gets converted into runoff when we develop, and groundwater here is staying pretty similar. Next slide. And so I like what ChatGPT said about Delta water. It says it's the linchpin tying hydrology to land use. So it's the way we quantify what kind of management we need on the landscape. And not to say that everybody's going to manage down to 100% to pre-development levels. Those are going to be functions of what targets are set in a particular watershed based on the needs of the receiving body, whether you've got a quality issue, blue-green algae issue in a lake, or you've got a small receiving stream, or you're upstream of a source water for drinking water intake, or lots of different reasons why you're managing this water. But as we look at it, we've seen in this phase 2 that came after January of engagement with EPA, that they have on the right, that they're in the right arrow there, their starting assumption is that stormwater is surface runoff, and therefore a license is required to use stormwater regardless of the volume or purpose for using it. And they are giving us this 6250 cubic meter exemption. However, on the left arrow, under the Water Act, we already have an exclusion for drainage, flood control, erosion control, channel realignment. So it is excluded, but because of just, I guess, the experience and expertise of the folks at the province, we've come through more than a decade of not being able to reconcile those two ideas. And surface runoff, there's a difference between natural surface runoff and what we get from urban areas. And so we're seeing acceptance by the province in phase 2. They specifically reference Delta water as this could be a good thing, but they also in the phase 2 say, like, you know, it's surface runoff. So I posed the question, it's like, from what water body is the stormwater being withdrawn that you need to put a diversion license on it? And of course, the answer is it is not a diversion. It just isn't. It's drainage management. And so we still have to work through this fundamental contradiction, and Delta water gives us a tool to do that. But they're grappling with the idea that you know, they're trying to solve things by changing the Water Act and the regulation, but Delta water shouldn't. Yeah, there's no appropriate way really to recognize that, because it's calculation. It's not a, you know, give us a number, a single number, or you know, blanket exemption, or a, you know, it doesn't fit into those tools. So we're advocating for it to come in at the master drainage plan level. And of course, then if something is going below Delta water, that is a withdrawal, and to treat that as such. Next slide. Another aspect of what they've asked for is bringing rainwater into the Water Act, because it's not part of the definition of water in the Water Act. And so that leads to uncertainty around licensing requirements, and that, you know, maybe people are just going to, you know, you're just going to take it. And it's, we've said, you know, you can bring rainwater into the definition of stormwater. You can bring rainwater into the definition of water in terms of stormwater management. Rainwater is just stormwater, you know, earlier. It's going to, you know, contribute what it contributes to stormwater. And there's an amount of self-limitation in that, like the size of a cistern that you would build and the limits of what the roof can catch and the costs associated with it. There's a certain amount of a feedback loop there that kind of goes together. We said, if you like, exempt domestic on-site uses and make the other stuff what has to be kind of go through some process. But I think we didn't get too messed about this, because they're going to kind of do what they're going to do. The whole thing about rainwater here is it's defined as water before it hits the ground. As Judy Stewart says, it's a cake on the roof, and which is different than a cake on the ground. And so the rainwater before it touches the ground is really kind of semantics. But for instance, you're familiar with the water center in Calgary, where they use they run roof runoff out into sort of bioretention or wetland basins and then collect it for toilet and urinal flushing. If they had put it just directly at the downspout to collect it, then it's rainwater and it's the purview of the owner. But as soon as it touches the ground, it's the Crown's. And so really just semantics. Next slide. Wastewater reuse, they've identified that there's only a mechanism for reuse with the producer of the wastewater. And so looking at a redefinition of that. Next slide. So what we have is a diversity of possibilities blurring traditional lines, where before we would sort of have these line on the left, line on the right of rainwater turns into stormwater, goes into a pipe, goes to a pond, goes to an outfall. And then the other process for drinking water on the right, which involves a withdrawal license. And now we see, because we want to irrigate maybe with pond water, or we can be irrigating out of a bioretention facility, that's the stormwater, sort of what happens along the pathway for intervening there with soil cells and other kinds of source control practices. We can take water from there as well. So all these different things we can do, and of course aquifer storage and recovery that can come in to kind of help us balance drought and flood. I left deep injection off because really it's a withdrawal from the water cycle. It's not coming back somewhere, whereas all these other things are kind of coming back in the system. And so, not really wanting to address that, not really kind of our purview. Next slide. And so without kind of going too far into it, I showed you some examples today. If we start on the upper left there with rainwater being used for toilet and urinal flushing, not crossing over and going into the wastewater system, or drinking water being used in a spray park and then that being used to irrigate baskets or something, that's technically gray water. That's not really allowed, shouldn't be happening. Drinking water going for hydrant testing, as Airdrie was trying here, and then going back to irrigation, which then is still potentially going to generate runoff that's going to could go into the stormwater system or directly back to the pond. And then, did I have another one? No, that's the ones I wanted to tell you about. So this idea of this interconnectedness and wastewater potentially commingling with stormwater, and EPA trying to kind of like, how can we manage all of this? And then so really what we're advocating for is for EPA to get out of the middle and to just look at what's being diverted and what's being returned. So return flows, next slide. The final thing that they're asking about, and this idea of net licensing. So should gross diversion remain the basis for licenses? Seems okay. But where can we use this idea of a net diversion? And of course, it lends itself to very much to, it's like EPA doesn't need to know what's happening, doesn't have to look and see how the sausage is made or how many times or where the water goes within the cycle. But that they just need to know what's making it back to the river or lake and what that quality is. And quality is already controlled through a PIA, so we're not really focused on that. It's all the quandary is on the quantity side. The summary slide. Next slide. So too much and not enough. I've told you about this manifesto where you can see more some of the ideas. Of course, that was static in January 2025. This is an ongoing conversation, which you are welcome to participate in. If people are more interested in getting involved in some of that policy discussion, please reach out to me. We see that there are 4 mechanisms roughly that support, that LID practices can support. We need to look at things holistically, and this distributed idea, it helps us restore the water balance locally, and we get so many more benefits out of that approach. Soil cells and similar might be the only way we can support the urban forest in long-term drought. Net licensing looks promising. Delta water is a necessary tool, but we don't need to change the Water Act or regulation to employ it. We just need to understand what belongs in the Water Act and what can be accomplished through the MDP or other tools. So thank you very much for that. That leaves 5 minutes for questions and comments. And thanks, Judy, for your comments. I know you've been tracking this topic from the earliest days. And I hope that we will get to speak with EPA more. We've had some better interactions more recently, in some movement in the idea of seeing some value to Delta water, but not necessarily understanding still that fundamental thing of it's not a diversion. And even though their own act and regulation tell us that these things are exempt. So we've just got to keep working. So thanks everyone for your time and attention. And yeah, again, if you have any feedback.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions. But, yeah, thank you.
No
Alida,
questions. It's all clear.
You obviously answered the duties.
Yeah, so I'm hopeful at this stage that you know, if they will take the time to dig into it, that we can get some movement. But you know, when they close the door and it's like we've taken your information and then they go and run with it, and it's quite quite difficult to not be in conversation with them, because it is an evolution of thought for sure, and why we need the community practice to get the various voices in. So yes, so it is hopeful, and see where it goes.
Well, if there's no questions coming forward, give Alida another hand for her presentation. Excellent.
I guess we'll go back to the floor then. I know there isn't much time for networking, but we'll leave it open till 12:30. I know we're going to go get lunch, but